The grand ballroom was bathed in golden light, sparkling crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over everything. There were fresh floral arrangements in every corner, delicate white roses and peonies set in gleaming vases, and the soft hum of classical music played in the background, creating the perfect atmosphere for a night of celebration. The guests were arriving, all dressed to impress in their finest evening attire. It was the kind of scene you see in movies, glittering, elegant, and just a little bit unreal. I was standing near the entrance, greeting our guests as they made their way in, a smile plastered on my face. Everyone was complimenting me on the venue, on how stunning the decorations looked, how they couldn't wait for the big celebration. The buzz in the air was palpable, and I could almost hear the collective excitement for the night ahead. It was supposed to be the night, my engagement party. The night I would officially become Jake's fiancé, the night everyone would be congratulating us and admiring our beautiful life. The night that would solidify my place in the world, my father's daughter, engaged to the promising young businessman working at his company. Jake, my fiancé, was on the other side of the room, talking to some of the guests, including my father's business partners. He looked every bit the part, handsome, charming, wearing his crisp suit like it was tailor-made for him. I could see the way people gravitated toward him, his easy smile and confident demeanor drawing admiration from everyone. He was perfect, at least that's what I kept telling myself. I watched him from across the room, the bright lights making his dark hair shine under the glow. His hands moved gracefully as he spoke, always making sure to engage with the people around him. Jake had always been like that. Comfortable in a crowd, always saying the right things. As we got closer to the big moment, the toast, the speeches, I couldn't help but feel a strange flutter of nerves deep in my chest. "Raven, darling, you look stunning as always." My mother's voice broke through my thoughts, her hand lightly resting on my shoulder. She was dressed in a floor-length sapphire gown that caught the light perfectly, her platinum blonde hair swept back in a neat updo. She was the image of grace, just like she always was. "Thanks, Mom," I said, smiling back at her. "Everything looks perfect, doesn't it?" "Oh, yes, dear," she responded, her eyes scanning the room with approval. "Your father and I couldn't have asked for a more elegant affair. And Jake? Well, you know how proud we are of him. He's truly a catch, Raven." I nodded, forcing the smile to stay on my face. My mother was always so proud of Jake, always ready to sing his praises. I wasn't sure when it happened, but somewhere along the way I began to feel more like an accessory to Jake than a partner in this relationship. Still, I kept those thoughts buried. Tonight was supposed to be perfect. I couldn't let anything or anyone ruin that. "Jake's out there," my mom continued. "He's mingling with the guests. He'll be so happy when you two take the stage for the announcement. You've got a bright future ahead of you two. Everyone can see that." I tried to focus on her words, but they felt distant, like an echo bouncing in the back of my mind. "Yeah, I think everything's going to be fine." It wasn't like me to doubt anything. I had everything: wealth, family, a perfect fiancé. Everything was going according to plan. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The room filled with laughter, and people continued to congratulate me, admiring the extravagant decorations and the meticulous planning. But as the night carried on, something gnawed at me. It wasn't a strong feeling, just a quiet voice in the back of my mind that I couldn't quite ignore. Was I really happy? Or was I just playing my part in the grand performance that everyone expected of me? I pushed the thought away, smiling politely as one of the guests complimented my engagement ring. A flawless diamond, of course. Perfect. Everything was perfect. I just had to keep telling myself that. After all, this was what everyone wanted. This was what my parents had dreamed of for me. I was doing the right thing. But as I glanced at Jake once more, speaking with yet another business partner, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Maybe it was just pre-party nerves. Maybe I was just overthinking things. Whatever it was, I didn't have time to dwell on it. The night was already well underway, and I had a role to play. I would smile, I would make my grand entrance, and everything would go according to plan. The applause would ring out, the speeches would be made, and Jake and I would be the center of attention. What I didn't know, though, was that the night would soon take a turn that would change everything, and it all started with something I overheard. The night was drawing near, and everything was set in place. The final touches were being added to the decor, the catering staff was running around, and the guests were starting to arrive, their laughter and excitement filling the air. Yet, despite the bustling atmosphere, I couldn't shake the sense of unease that had been following me around all evening. It was strange. Everything was perfect. Jake and I were about to announce our engagement to the world, and our families were about to witness what should have been the happiest night of our lives. But something felt off. I excused myself from the guest area, stepping into a quiet hallway behind the ballroom. I needed a moment to gather my thoughts, to shake off the growing doubts. As I walked through the hallway, the sound of Jake's voice reached me. He was talking to someone, his tone low and intimate. At first I thought nothing of it, but then something made me stop. It was the way he spoke, calm, almost too familiar, with an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite place. Curiosity piqued, I edged closer to the room where the conversation was taking place. The door to the small side room was slightly ajar, and through the crack I could see Jake's silhouette standing near the window. He was speaking to a woman, her back to me, but I could hear every word that was coming out of his mouth. I know, Jake said, his voice filled with a tone I'd never heard before. It's the perfect setup. Raven's family has money, influence, the whole package. I just need to get my hands on the company. Once I take control, I'll be able to live the life I've always dreamed of. She'll be my ticket to it all. My heart stopped. I froze, the words sinking in like a stone in my chest. He was talking about me, about our engagement, as though it was nothing more than a transaction. My legs felt weak beneath me as I struggled to comprehend what I had just heard. "And Raven?" the woman asked, her voice cool, casual. "She's just a stepping stone," Jake replied, a smirk in his voice that I could almost feel. "I'll marry her, play the role of the doting fiancé for a while. But once I have everything I need, I'm out. You and I, that's the real thing. You're the one I truly love." My mind went blank for a second. I could hardly breathe as the weight of his words slammed into me. Jake, my fiancé, wasn't in love with me. He never had been. I was just a means to an end, a way for him to secure his future with my family's wealth and power. He had planned to use me, to use my trust, and I had been so blind to it all. "Don't worry, I've got it all planned," Jake continued, his voice dripping with confidence. "Once we're married, I'll get Raven to sign off on everything. Then, we'll live the life we've always wanted. I'll take over her family's company and finally be the man I've always dreamed of." I felt as though the air had been knocked out of me. The laughter, the joy from the party outside, all faded away. I couldn't believe it. The man I had trusted, the man I thought was the love of my life, had been deceiving me all along, and worse, he didn't even care. I wanted to storm in there to confront him, but I stayed frozen. Part of me wanted to believe that I had misunderstood, that maybe this wasn't as bad as it seemed, but deep down, I knew it was the truth, and it hurt more than anything else in the world. I turned slowly, my mind racing. I had to get out of there. I needed air. But as I walked toward the back exit of the ballroom, I bumped into my mother, who was adjusting her dress for the party. "Raven, there you are," she exclaimed, giving me a quick smile. "Jake's been looking for you. Come on, honey, everyone's waiting." I forced a smile, my heart still heavy with the weight of Jake's betrayal. I nodded stiffly. "I'll be right there." I needed time to think, time to figure out what I was going to do. I spent the next few moments alone in the bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I tried to steady my breathing, but my hands were shaking. I wasn't sure whether to be angry, sad, or completely numb. Part of me wanted to cry, to let it all out, but the other part knew that if I did, I would lose control. And I couldn't afford to lose control, not tonight. As I stood there, lost in my own thoughts, a decision began to form in my mind. It was impulsive, risky, But it was the only way I could think of to regain control. I had been the one to plan this entire night, the one who had made all the arrangements. I could turn it all around. I wasn't going to let Jake use me any longer. I wasn't going to let him get away with his lies. I took a deep breath and walked back toward the ballroom, my steps deliberate. The music was still playing softly in the background. The guests were laughing and chatting, completely unaware of what had just transpired behind the scenes. But as I entered the room, I knew I had to make a move that would change everything. The night was far from over, but for me, it had already taken an unexpected turn, and I had no intention of letting Jake, or anyone, walk all over me again. The room had gone quiet, the stunned silence hanging thick in the air. I could feel my heart racing in my chest, but my hands didn't tremble. There was no fear in me, only an electric surge of energy, like I had finally found my voice, my power. This wasn't my engagement party anymore, and I had no intention of letting it be about Jake and his lies. I was done. I let the microphone hover in my hand for a moment, taking in the sight of Jake, his face turning from shock to a deepening red of embarrassment and anger. His mistress, oh, how I loved seeing the discomfort on her face, stood next to him, her eyes flicking nervously around the room, as if trying to make sense of the scene I had just orchestrated. It was a delicate balance. Control the narrative, stay calm, and watch them squirm. I took a deep breath and let the silence stretch a little longer, letting the tension build before I spoke again. My voice rang out with clear conviction as I addressed the room. Since this celebration is clearly not for me and Jake, let's make it one for Jake and his true love. I said it with all the elegance I could muster, but behind it was the biting sarcasm that only I could hear. A wave of murmurs washed through the room, but I paid them no mind. This was my moment. Jake stood there in disbelief, no doubt unsure of how to play his hand, now that everything he had plotted was being unraveled in front of everyone. He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off, holding up my hand. "Not now, Jake," I said, my voice steady. "You had your chance to explain yourself, but you've been caught, and now we all know exactly what kind of man you are." I turned my attention back to the woman standing awkwardly by his side. She was looking from me to Jake, then back to the crowd, her expression a mixture of discomfort and hesitation. I wasn't sure what she expected to happen next, but it wasn't what she got. I smiled at her, not a warm smile, but a calculating one that let her know I was in complete control now. "Please," I gestured toward the stage, "come join us up here. It's only right that we celebrate the true engagement, the one that's been kept a secret after all." Her face paled as she realized exactly what was happening. But she was already in too deep, too caught in the lie. She stepped hesitantly toward the stage, and I made sure to lead her there. My movements were deliberate, measured. This wasn't about revenge. This was about reclaiming my power and setting the record straight. The room was eerily quiet as she walked up beside me. The guests shifted uncomfortably, trying to make sense of the spectacle they were witnessing. But they were nothing more than witnesses now. I was the one in charge. Jake's face twisted in fury. "Raven, you have no right," he began, his voice loud and desperate, but I silenced him with a sharp look. "No right?" I repeated, cutting him off. "I have every right. You think you can use me to get ahead in life? You think you can manipulate me and my family, all the while planning to discard me when you've gotten what you want?" My voice was steady, but there was steel behind it. "Well, now everyone knows the truth, Jake, and it's not the one you wanted them to believe." The crowd was silent now, and Jake's anger only made my resolve stronger. He moved as though to step forward, to say something, maybe to apologize, maybe to try and salvage something, but I raised my hand again. "You've said everything I need to hear," I said coldly, "and now I'm going to make sure you don't get another chance." I turned to the staff, who were standing frozen in the background. "Everyone," I said, addressing them as if this were still my party, "please, let's make sure Jake and his lovely companion are properly taken care of. Drinks for the happy couple. They deserve nothing less than the best service." The awkwardness in the room was palpable. Jake's eyes darted around, searching for someone to back him up, but no one spoke. Not one of the guests dared to say a word. They were watching the drama unfold, and they were too afraid to get involved. I let the moment linger, and then I turned to the other side of the room, where Jake's fate truly lay. This wasn't just about making him uncomfortable. This was about taking back what was rightfully mine. I had spent so much time trying to fit into a mold that didn't suit me, trying to build a life with someone who never saw me as anything more than a stepping stone. But now I saw things clearly. I picked up the microphone again. "And as for Jake," I said, my voice ringing out with authority, "since he has shown his true colors tonight, I'm afraid I have no other choice but to immediately terminate his position at my father's company. Effective immediately, Jake will no longer be working for us. His services are no longer required." There was a gasp from the crowd, a collective intake of breath as people looked at Jake's face, which had gone completely pale. He had expected me to be hurt, humiliated, maybe even begging for his apology, but what he didn't expect was the strength in my voice, the way I had taken control of the situation, turning it into my victory. "You're fired, Jake," I said, my words final, the weight of them hanging in the air. "I won't stand by while you use my family, my company, and my trust for your own selfish gains. If you want to leave, feel free to go now. But know this, you're no longer welcome in my world." The silence was deafening as Jake stood there, stunned, his jaw tight with anger. I didn't care. I had nothing more to say to him. This was my moment. This was my victory. As I turned away from him, I saw the woman who had been standing by him, his mistress, looking at me, her face now flushed with guilt. She hadn't expected this. I could see the realization dawning on her that she had been just another pawn in Jake's game. "Don't worry," I said to her, my tone no longer cruel but filled with a quiet satisfaction. "This party is yours now. Enjoy it." Without another word, I turned on my heels, leaving the stage and the scene behind me. I walked away from Jake and the mess he had tried to create, knowing that this was just the beginning. I wasn't going to allow anyone to control my life, my future, or my company, and I certainly wasn't going to let a man like Jake define who I was. As I stepped away from the chaos, I realized one important truth. Sometimes you have to burn the bridges behind you to walk away from a life that was never meant for you, and in that fire, you'll find the strength to build something far more beautiful, something that's all your own. And so, as the echoes of the failed engagement party rang in the background, I knew I was finally free. And the future? It was mine to shape. As I stepped away from the stage, leaving behind the chaos I had just created, a strange feeling washed over me. It was a mix of relief and liberation. I had done something I never thought I would be able to do. I had taken back control of my life and made a decision that would change everything, not just for Jake, but for me. The event had started as a celebration of my engagement, my future with Jake. But it ended with me standing on my own 2 feet, no longer defined by the expectations of others, no longer waiting for validation from a man who had only used me to climb the social ladder, no longer the naive, love-struck girl who believed in fairy tales. I had seen the truth, and I had made my own destiny. I wasn't sure where to go next. The night was young, the party still in full swing, but I had no interest in celebrating anymore. The thought of being surrounded by people who only saw me as the daughter of my father, the heiress to his fortune, filled me with a strange mixture of disgust and determination. "Raven, wait up!" My father's voice called out from behind me as I walked briskly toward the exit. I stopped, turning to face him, trying to hide the emotions that were swirling inside me. He approached, concern etched on his face. "Are you all right? I know this has been a lot to process." His voice was calm, steady, the way it always was. He didn't understand. Not yet. I nodded, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep acting like everything was fine. My life had just been turned upside down, and I needed to take control. I had to make a decision, and I couldn't do it in secret anymore. "Dad," I said, my voice firm but not cold, I'm done with this. I'm done with the company being run by men who think they can use me as a pawn in their games. I'm done with Jake. He doesn't deserve a place here, and neither does anyone else who thinks they can manipulate me. From now on, I'll be the one in charge. Not him, not anyone else. My father's brow furrowed as he processed my words. Raven, he began, hesitation in his voice. This is sudden. Are you sure you're ready for this? I've been running the company for years and I never expected. I interrupted him, my voice unwavering. I've been ready for years. I've been waiting for someone else to tell me that I could do this, but I've learned that I don't need anyone's permission, not even yours. The company is mine, and it's time for me to step up and lead it. There was a moment of silence between us, heavy with the weight of what I had just said. My father didn't respond immediately, and I could see the storm of thoughts in his eyes. He was proud of me, I knew that, but I could tell he was still processing what it meant for me to take charge. Finally, he sighed, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. I suppose you're right. You've always been the one to surprise me. If you're ready, then I'll support you. With that, I felt the last shred of doubt slip away. The approval I had always craved was no longer important to me. I didn't need anyone's validation. I left my father standing there, the decision made. It was time to take the next step. My heart was still racing from everything that had happened tonight, but I knew that this was the right choice. Back at the party, Jake was nowhere to be found. It was almost as if the moment I had exposed him had evaporated him from the space, and I didn't feel an ounce of regret. He had been the symbol of everything wrong in my life, someone who used my wealth and position to get ahead while manipulating me into thinking I was the one who had the power. Now, I was in control. The sound of clinking glasses and low murmurs reached my ears as I made my way to the back office, where the management team had gathered. I took a deep breath before pushing open the door. They all turned to me, and for the first time in my life, I felt the weight of their eyes on me. Not as the spoiled daughter of a wealthy man, but as someone who was about to change the game. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice steady and commanding, I've made a decision. Jake is no longer a part of this company. He will not be taking over anything here. I've heard enough. From now on, I am in charge. A few of the employees exchanged looks, unsure of what was happening, but they didn't argue. The silence was thick with anticipation. I stood tall, feeling a strange mixture of fear and excitement. You'll be receiving an official statement from me later. There will be changes and I'll be overseeing all decisions moving forward, I said, feeling the power that had always been in my grasp but never truly realized. A man from the management team stepped forward, his expression one of reluctant respect. Raven, are you sure about this? You know, this is going to change everything. There are people in this company who have been working under your father for years. Are you prepared for the backlash? I didn't flinch. The company was built on my father's back, but it's time for it to be mine now. I don't care about the backlash. I care about doing things my way and making sure this company stays true to its roots while evolving into something better. The days of hiding in the shadows are over. The room fell silent once more, but this time it was different. The murmurs of doubt were replaced with the quiet understanding that this was happening. The dynamic had shifted, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. I left the office with my head held high, my confidence growing with every step. I wasn't just taking control of the company, I was taking control of my life. I was no longer the girl who was defined by others. I was Raven, the woman who had stepped into her power, the woman who had learned the true meaning of independence. As I walked away from the office and back into the main hall, I caught a glimpse of Jake. He stood there, his face contorted in disbelief, clearly not understanding what had just happened. I gave him a knowing look, my heart still steady but now filled with satisfaction. I had turned the tables. I had taken my life back, and no one, not Jake, not anyone, would ever take that from me again. The party had started as a celebration of a future that was never meant to be mine. But as the night wore on, it became the turning point in my life, the moment I realized that I didn't need anyone to define my worth. And with that realization, I was free. As I stood in the office, looking out over the city skyline, the weight of everything that had happened over the past few days began to sink in. My fingers traced the polished edge of the desk, the one I had inherited just hours ago. The desk that now symbolized my victory, my power, and most importantly, my freedom. I had walked away from the wreckage of my engagement, from a man who had used me, from the lies, the manipulation, and the expectations that had been placed on me. The betrayal had stung, yes, it had hurt like nothing I had ever felt before. But as the pain subsided, it made space for something else to grow, something stronger, more resilient. I was finally in control of my own destiny. I wasn't just a piece in someone else's game. I wasn't just the heiress to a fortune, waiting to be married off to the highest bidder. I was Raven, the woman who had taken back everything that had been stolen from her, including her self-worth. No one could define my success but me. I walked through the empty halls of the company, the silence echoing with the promise of new beginnings, the footsteps of the people I once relied on, the ones who thought they knew what was best for me, were now gone. They had no place here anymore, not in my world. I had built this company from the inside out, alongside my father, but now it was time for me to steer it in a new direction. The board of directors had accepted my leadership without question, and it wasn't because of my family name. It was because of the vision I had laid out for the company. It was because I had proven that I had more to offer than just my inheritance. I had earned this position, and I would not let anyone take it from me. I thought about Jake. He was gone now, exiled from both my life and the company. The look of confusion and disbelief on his face as I had dismissed him from the board was a memory I would not soon forget. He had underestimated me, and now he would have to live with the consequences of his actions. It wasn't just about the betrayal, though. It was about the fact that I had trusted someone who didn't deserve it. I had allowed myself to be manipulated because I thought I needed him to be happy. But now I knew that happiness didn't come from someone else. It came from within. I looked at the framed picture of my father on the desk, his smiling face frozen in time. He had always been there for me, guiding me, teaching me the value of hard work and integrity. But now I was walking the path on my own, ready to take on the challenges that lay ahead. I wasn't just his daughter anymore. I was Raven, a force to be reckoned with. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts, and I turned to see my new assistant standing at the threshold. "Raven, there's a call for you," she said, her voice tentative but respectful. I smiled, the weight of the past few days lifting off my shoulders. "Put it through," I said, settling into my chair. As I answered the call, I realized that I was no longer afraid. No longer afraid of losing my place, no longer afraid of being vulnerable. I was ready for whatever came next. The voice on the other end was familiar, though I hadn't expected to hear from her. It was one of the board members, the one who had been the most skeptical of me when I first took control. "Raven, I just wanted to say, I didn't think you'd be able to pull this off. But you've proven me wrong. We're all on board with your vision. The company's future looks brighter than ever." I leaned back in my chair, a quiet sense of pride swelling in my chest. "Thank you, but the real work starts now." She laughed. "I have no doubt you'll do great things. I just wanted to make sure you knew we're behind you." I hung up the phone, feeling lighter than I had in years. I wasn't just the girl who had been used by people she trusted. I wasn't just the daughter of a wealthy man. I was more than that. This was my company, my future, and no one would take it from me. I had built myself from the ground up, piece by piece, and now I was ready to make my mark. I took a deep breath and stood up, walking toward the window. The city sprawled out before me, full of possibilities, full of promise. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to find out. I smiled, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The past was behind me, and I was free. I knew now that independence wasn't just about being financially successful or proving others wrong. It was about reclaiming your own life, your own voice, your own power. It was about realizing that you don't need anyone to tell you that you're enough because you already know it. As I looked out over the city, I realized I had everything I needed right here, inside myself. The world was mine to conquer, and I would do it on my terms. And as for Jake and his mistress, let them live in their own small world, because I was no longer interested in playing by their rules. The final lesson was clear. The true measure of success is not in the people who try to tear you down, but in the strength you find within yourself to rise above it. And for the first time in my life, I had done just that.